There is a moment in every life when you decide to rise, to stand taller than your fear, to speak louder than your doubt, to chase the vision that sets your soul on fire. This is that moment, and here we walk it together with stories that awaken, voices that inspire, and truths that set you free. This is Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where hope has a voice, and that voice is yours. And welcome to the show, everybody, and welcome, Rochelle. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. It's quite a sparky day, don't you think?
I think so. And by the way, did you know that shift happens? Okay, that's not the way. That's not
happen.
That's not the actual bumper sticker. The bumper says H or SHIT happens, but shift happens in our world because we're able to shift the perspective that people may have about things and about their life and about their trauma and all the stuff that we talk about. So in this episode, shift happens good, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, it does. And who better to have to come and share that message than Alex Sydnor is here with us today. Follow along with us on his website, which is shiftgroupconsulting.com, which we'll talk a little bit about. But thank you for being here to talk about the shift happening stuff, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. And yes, shift does happen. Sometimes not as easily as we'd like it to, which is why I'm in business.
And by the way, you've got more business than you can handle, the way American businesses are run these days. And we're excited to talk to you about it because one of the things that you mentioned on your website, and I want to bring it up, is that you're an entrepreneur. You've got a great plan. You want to put this great plan into action. You've got a strategy. You've got all the things to make everything just work like a top, but it doesn't work, Rochelle. Do you know why?
Tell me.
No, we'll have Alex tell you.
Oh. Alex, tell me.
So often it doesn't work because the goals aren't enough, right? The accountability measures, et cetera, there is a human behavior that we're not addressing in the change, because all change requires human behavior. And so often those plans don't take that into account, all the soft stuff that makes people want to and motivated to change along with what the plan has called for.
So there also has to be, there's a vision attached to that everybody has to, and they call it buy-in. Is that when you buy into the vision, or is that one of those catchwords that doesn't really make much sense?
Well, I think it's actually important to have buy-in, but unfortunately it has become a catchword, and we think that buy-in means I share what we do with buy-in frequently is we tell our teams what we've decided and expect them to come along, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really staged as cooperation. We're telling you things we've already decided. Now we want you to buy in, but you're not participating in creating that decision. And so true buy-in doesn't happen that way, which is part of the problem. We think we have buy-in because we shared our decisions. The executive leaders have said, this is our vision even. It can even be compelling, but the team had no role in choosing it. So really they're being asked to cooperate and come along. And real buy-in happens when they're a little bit more involved in the process.
So how do you allow them to be involved and still make choices for the company that are for strategy purpose?
Yeah. Well, it's right that the executive leaders are making those choices, right? So that's where the decision authority does lie, but what are they making it based upon? And frequently, they have biases, they have blinders, they have only some of the experience of what their frontline teams are experiencing, what customers are experiencing. And so there is, I think, a facilitated process of gaining some of those insights from the front line, from managers, and from customers, really to help those executive leaders have a broader and a deeper view of what's really going on in their business, what's really going on with their teams, what's really going on with their customers, and what those needs are. And where do you find that? Well, you find that by engaging those team members before you've made your choices.
And I love what you say on your website, because I've worked for a bunch of companies and I've never seen this happen, where the executive team goes and talks to, I don't know, like, like a real customer.
Yep.
I was in food sales for a long time, and I never had the general sales manager walk in with me to one of my customers just to say thank you for the business and what can we do better.
Tell you, it's really powerful when you do that with executives. And the further up, if we will, you go in an organization, the farther away you get from those customers frequently. And over time, we lose touch, and it's just a natural expectation. I work a lot in healthcare and hospitals, and I implemented a program in one of those organizations where we essentially had an executive rounding on patients in their hospital rooms every day. And so we'd cycle through it, but every executive was in hospital rooms at least every other week, and just experiencing and hearing about their experience. Are you getting what you need? Is the care what you expect? And letting that experience be what it is. But having that real face-to-face interaction, it's what I call connecting to purpose. Other people call it that too, but really that person in that bed, in that case, is your purpose for your company. And staying connected to that purpose really is self-motivating. It kind of keeps you focused, but it also provides those insights of real experiences, and you don't get so disconnected from them.
Yeah.
How do you get the executive to actually do that? I've known a ton of executives who's like, you want me to go talk to these people, especially when they're not happy for whatever reason.
Well, in that particular instance, we made the harder choice previously, which was that we had daily rounds in the hospital already going on every day at noon. So all executives, VPs, directors, and managers gathered every day at noon. We just didn't round on patients. And so the habit of already being on the floors, but we were rounding on team members, that was already in place. So all we did was peel off one executive on each of those days and paired them with our patient experience director. So they were already kind of out there. We just needed to point them in a different direction. The harder choice was getting them to say, and I was part of that team, was like, what? You want me to spend 40 minutes every day at noon? I can't afford done.
Right, and it is, Rochelle, don't you think it's necessary for the guys in charge to hear what the people that are being impacted by the service that's being offered, don't you think that's important? Why do you think, and then we'll ask Alex, why do you think so many executives and so many teams don't do that?
Let me tell you, I think Alex just told us, for one, it impacts everybody, right? It impacts the other doctors who work for that person who's like, wow, they're a good person, and I love my job and being here under that kind of purpose and motivation, because you got to have something to show you, right? So a good example, but it's good for the person in the hospital. Imagine them telling their families who came to visit later that night, the executive came in and asked me about how I felt having care here. That is a whole nother direction that is so empowering. And then to connect the person in charge back to that purpose, like you said, how can I afford that? Well, I think it probably comes down to time, if I'm correct. And maybe there's probably a few other things, Alex, but you said, how can I afford that? Well, really, if you don't take that time, and you would have, if you could go back, you'd realize that you really couldn't afford not to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And the value we got out of those experiences certainly proved it over time. But, Kevin, I think that sometimes we as executives, there's a value to our experience, but it's also a blinder, right? So we gain experience through life. Some things become a matter of habit. We can do them without thinking about them. Those are good things about expertise, but at the same time, they blind us from any new experiences. And that's why I think that executives get comfortable. They've been the manager, they've been the director, now they're an executive. They've had those experiences earlier in their career. And they get comfortable thinking they don't need them again. But then over time, they do become, the risk is that they become sort of immune to understanding the lived experiences of whoever it is they're trying to serve.
Have you ever had a situation where you invited an executive to go to visit an unhappy customer?
Yes, absolutely. And very interesting, actually, within the healthcare space. I mean, it's kind of a legal perspective, but sometimes if there's a risk or a harm, for example, that happens, the lawyers will say, "Oh, defend, defend, defend." But actually, the risk management folks will say, the best thing you could do is sit down with that patient and apologize. It actually reduces the cost of those harms to the organization as well, because they're less likely to sue when you just say, we messed up here. We apologize for the experience that you had. But it's hard. Not everybody's prepared for it. I think mostly there's value in sharing positive experiences to keep people in mind of what the ideal is, so that we're always driving to the ideal, and you're trying to create the circumstances within your company to always deliver those ideal experiences. So you're really connecting to vision. But yes, it's important to see the negative experiences too. I actually did a whole. I was invited to take responsibility for patient experience in this one organization, and our scores had been flat. They weren't horrible, but they've been flat for a long time. We used to be a leader. All of our competitors had passed us. We'd become a little complacent, but we'd been looking at the data. We knew what was going on, but we hadn't really been making any change. And I actually set up a retreat where I paired off those executives and gave them a scenario. Let's say pay a cancer patient, an ED patient, et cetera, do pregnancy diagnosis. And they outlined an ideal case. Oh, well, we would deliver care like this for that cancer patient. Breast cancer, she gets a screening mammography. There's some concern. The next day, she's scheduled for the diagnostic. She gets the results that day. She meets with the nurse navigator. She needs to see the oncologist. That appointment is, scheduled before she leaves the office, and it happens in the same week. That's the ideal experience. So they outlined these ideal experiences as pairs. We shared them in the group. Well, then I handed them sealed envelopes, and in those envelopes was an actual bad case, to your point, Kevin. They weren't facing the patient, but they were actually real cases where the outcomes had not been so good, where our service had not been matching that ideal. And, that was a real tough kind of hour together going through these actual patient experiences that were quite the opposite of this ideal that they had just sort of brainstormed for themselves. But that was the spark that created the change that all those trends of patient experience.
Rochelle?
This has sent my brain down a rabbit hole, Alex. I think of things broadly, but I think about my own experience, because we're going to make a positive out of this. We're going to find it. I know we will. But what you just said is the most humanitarian way to handle the situation is kind of not legal in some cases. And I've been in and out of the hospital so many times with miscarriages and stuff. And they'll tell you all these things, right? But as I've learned, I've been the customer who's been in there yelling at the person in the ER, or really just being mean because they didn't spend enough time with me. They didn't have the knowledge, that I didn't agree with the diagnosis or whatever they had told me. I didn't like that I got no answers, right? So I am affecting their mood negatively, and they're aware. They are not able to help me any further. And there was this one doctor that challenged me to that point, and he didn't even apologize, but he came and he sat down, and I told him, I don't agree with you, and this is why. And he said, okay, that's okay. I had never heard a doctor say, okay. To hear me and to validate me was bigger than an apology or anything he could have said to make up for it or repeating himself. Right. And I don't know why we don't handle it more, because when I went back into the hospital again in ER, I think it was 3 weeks later, he helped me again. And I told him, I still don't agree with you, but I am very thankful for you. Yeah. And that dynamic changed the way I felt about being in a hospital in the first place, and who he was as a person, because we're all people. You have the doctor, you have the patient, you have all these people. But when we realize down to that core that you're helping bring these executives back of the humanitarian way to handle and help situations, no matter what level you're at, is probably the most important thing we could be focusing on here in our world right now. Do you agree?
Oh, I completely agree. And I'm glad that you had, in the end, that kind of experience where someone essentially
Me
just
too.
listened
Yeah.
and
It was the first
validated their
time.
experience. But in many cases, we can't solve those kind of problems at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's not even necessarily what, everybody wants in the moment. They want to be heard. They want their experience to be respected, and fed into the process, right? So, and you can do that, I think, importantly, obviously, with customers and patients, but also team members. Kevin, you were asking earlier, like, how do we get people to have buy-in? Well, you have to have those kinds of conversations also internally. They're not necessarily, starting with this kind of a conflict or this kind of harm situation, but the process is the same. I hear you. How was your experience? I hear you.
That is maybe the best 3 words that a boss or an owner can say is "I hear you," to the staff, to the customers, to everybody, and to the leadership that may be working for them. By the way, we're talking with Alex
Sydnor, everybody
Sydnor.
go to his website. Kevin, you can totally say that. Shiftgroupconsulting.com is his website. He's got all about him, his services, his work, and perspectives. I want to talk about why you have that there when we come back.
And what am I going to play, Michelle? I bet you know.
Oh my gosh, do it.
Here are some points to ponder from Positive Talk Radio. Some say leadership is about getting the work done, about pushing forward, no matter the cost. But what's the cost of a team with no purpose? What if a single act of support, a single moment of genuine grit could change everything? What if leadership was a catalyst? Because true leadership isn't about being in control. It's about empowering others to find their purpose. It's about leading with passion and igniting the fire in everyone around you, creating a culture of teamwork and common purpose. A true leader finds this culture by enthusiastic purpose and team development, making each team member feel empowered to create, improve, and execute their tasks with genuine passion and a strong belief in the company's mission and focus. In other words, lead with purpose. And welcome back to Positive Talk. My name is Kevin. Michelle is right there, and we've got a great guest for you today. And Alex, I got to ask you, what did you think of that piece and my definition of leadership?
Well, I think that we could have created it together, or I stole from you or you stole from me. I don't know which. It's perfect. We're a perfect match to be together today.
Absolutely. Well, perfect is pretty good, huh, Michelle?
It comes from practice.
I think it's a great message.
Yeah.
And the whole idea, let me give you an example. Michelle on Friday and I did something brand new that we've never, I've done a bunch of shows and we've never done what we did, which was just her and I talking. Well, today I asked the team their opinion, their honest opinion of what they thought. Did they like it? Could we make it better? How could we make it better? And what that did, and tell me if this is right. What that did is give them the feeling like, number one, we cared what they thought. And number two, we were encouraging them to give constructive criticism and thoughts about what they could do. So we were getting the team to believe in what we were doing, not just saying, this is what we're going to do and this is how it's going to work. Is that a good way to go?
You're asking me that question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I do think it's a great way to go. You want feedback, and it's important to not judge it when you get it, right? So let me hear what you have to say and just to accept it. Not that you might not probe, that you might not have follow-up questions, but you certainly don't want to defend whatever this, someone says, well, I don't really think it was the best thing. you don't want to defend against it because now you're just shutting down the next comment, right? The next person won't speak if you shut down, a previous comment. So, asking for input, honest input without judgment, and just taking it and walking away with it is a phenomenal thing to do. And that creates psychological safety, right? I can tell you that I thought that was horrible,
Yep.
and I'm not going to get fired. That's a really important, safe place to be. And if you can create that kind of safety for teams to share with you what's quote unquote really going on, what their perspective is, then you have the value of that. You have the value of that input. What you do with it is, maybe it is valuable, maybe it's not, but you never want to shut down that kind of stream of feedback, because that's where insights happen. Insights they don't come from your spreadsheets largely. They come from your stories that you gather from folks who are working in your business or interacting with the services that you offer.
Well, isn't that so important mainly too? Because Kevin doesn't do that all the time, but what does happen all the time is our team coming in and telling us how they feel, a new idea they may have had, something they're struggling with, something they may have noticed a mistake in, and none of it is viewed from any negative perspective because the space is open to speak freely and respectfully.
Yeah. And I do. I think that the more that you can cultivate that kind of an environment in any size organization, the more value you're getting from all of those diverse perspectives. And I do believe that we are stronger and less fragile as organizations and as companies when we don't only value the perspective of a small number of people who all have the same frame of reference. And unfortunately, executive teams can become like that, right? They evolve at a certain level, probably have similar educational backgrounds, et cetera. They can be a little bit of a monoculture.
It's true.
Alex, I have to tell you, sometimes executive teams that are not day to day in the businesses don't have any idea what our customers actually want. I ran a Mexican restaurant, and it was called Garcia's of Scottsdale. They're not here anymore, and this is one of the reasons why. The executive team said, refried beans and cheese, and there's a lot of calories in that. Maybe we should make our food a little bit more healthy. So we'll do a low calorie cheese. But they didn't check to see if it would actually melt. Because it requires oil in the cheese to be able to melt. Look at Purcell's face. It's
I
like,
love cheese. That's just not right.
And so consequently, our sales dropped precipitously because people came once and they said, this kind of sucks. It doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't even taste like cheese. But the executive team was like, oh, somebody sold them one. Let's be healthier. So you don't go, and they learned this lesson the hard way. You don't go to a Mexican restaurant because you want to eat healthily. You want the refried beans. You want the cheese and all the stuff. But businesses are like that. But I got to ask you, because do you realize the impact that you have on a company and the employees families? The ripple effect for what you do with Shift Group Consulting is huge, isn't it?
Well, I think that it is, because again, goals, strategies, plans, documents, communication, rollout, town halls, it doesn't change anything necessarily. But when you really start to address culture, performance culture, yes, but really culture and values and belief in success, identity, and how I see myself in the company and how we see the company, those start to touch human values. And yeah, they make an enormous impact on, can we actually make the change we're trying to make? They have a wonderful side benefit of really making it a better place to work, which then gives people, they don't go home full of friction and frustration over the place where they're employed.
Have you ever been in an organization you started working with, or maybe a specific person that was the there's nothing wrong with my company or my corporation, or we're doing just fine type of thing. And then after you worked with them, you saw these changes in them as a person and in the company that were mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's a really great question, Rochelle, because sometimes and you see this a lot in organizational development and leadership coaching, is we want people to feel differently. I want you to be more empathetic, I want you to be more sensitive. And that's a really hard thing to get going with a conversation. Yeah. However, if you focus on the behaviors, where I say, I want you to actually be in front of patients once a week. I want you to read out loud a patient testimonial at the front of every one of your team meetings. If you're in a quarterly management meeting and we're bringing a patient in live to share their experience, and maybe they're bringing team members up with them who were part of their care journey to acknowledge. You have all of these things happening. You don't have to tell them in advance that at the end of this, you will be more empathetic. In fact, if you do tell them at the advance of that, they'll probably, put their arms up and say, I don't want to go there. But they start doing it. And honestly, you start opening up because you start, valuing the experience. Same thing happens with leaders who you build a process where they're rounding on their team. And you do a light script so that they sit down once a month with their team members and say, how are you? How are things going for you? And that's the end of the question. Right? and over time, then they start having a relationship with their staff members that they didn't used to have.
I can always
connecting differently, and they become more empathetic.
Yeah. Exactly. And I could always tell when a company who had been told that they had a morale problem, because there was always the anonymous "how are we doing" thing that they would around, and then you would write how are you doing kind of thing. Nobody ever told the truth on those things because we were all scared that they could find out who said what. Yeah. and stuff. So I could always tell though when morale was bad that they would send those around.
The effort has to be authentic. And I think it also has to be tied to, again, more of a narrative set of values of what you think is important. There was an article in the newspaper last fall about a national company who had implemented a program where they instructed all of their team members to look people in the eye who are on the commercial floor of their enterprise at 10 feet. Acknowledge them at 5 feet and say, hello verbally in some way as they got closer. And there was a lot of criticism, and much of it was because there were team members inside saying, I'm just checking a box here, right? I don't know. I was told to do this. Yeah. Because it wasn't tied to something deeper, right? So I've actually implemented programs like that and been in organizations where those have been implemented, and they've been exceedingly successful because we talk about why it's important. Why is it that, and these were hospital settings, that, you're seeing someone in the hallway, you don't know why they're there. You don't know if they're there just because, they're getting some blood work done, or they're, visiting their mother who's dying up in the ICU. And, we make them more comfortable and at ease. And we improve their healing if they're a sick person, right? If they're in there for care, because we acknowledge who they are. And then the 5-4-1 rule doesn't sound like a checkbox. It's not a service standard. It's who we are. And that makes all the difference.
Oh, exactly. I was part of a company one time that they had a program. It was called the STAR program. You're welcome to use this. It's called Steps to acknowledge the customer, basically, and you were supposed to call them by name. And so you get their name from their credit card and something. And I said that to a guest who then complained because, of course, maybe it was inappropriate for me because her name was Yakamoto. And I said, Mrs. Yakamoto, do you know that is the general who bombed Pearl Harbor? And she didn't think that was an appropriate thing for me.
I might have fired you. You're lucky for that one.
I know, but Steps to Access Recognition was a program that they put into place, and none of the managers thought it was a good idea. They thought it was a waste of time, and why would we want to do that? I was the only one who embraced it, and so I got Star Manager of the Quarter. But when a company introduces a program like that and they don't get buy-in from the managers, then it's a waste of time, isn't it?
It is.
And money.
I can almost
I'm
see
sorry,
how
yes,
it makes
time
it
and money.
worse. People just be angry. They're like, we're just doing all these things every day just because we have to. It almost strips away the humanity, doesn't it?
Well, and there are a lot of checklists of, policies, especially in environments where there's, safety and, protocols and things like that. So it can become overwhelming for team members to, I got to think about all these things. And the more you can take it out of the checklist a little bit and just make it part of the identity of who we are, where there's an intrinsic motivation. And honestly, Kevin, it feels good to use someone else's name and have them react, positively to that. So let's focus on the connection that you create by that. And now I don't need the checklist anymore, because I know I get the value or the feedback of the wonderful experience of the reaction. And we have to pair these things together, right? You got to have the checklist, you got to have the accountability measures. We can do so much more than that, or else we just end up with this directive that doesn't get followed.
And yeah, it can be a shift show, if you know what I mean.
It can become a shift show.
Good catch. I was thinking the same thing.
And Rochelle, as we go into break, how can we get a hold of Alex? Because I think he needs to work with every company in America, because almost every company in America needs a shift change, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. So everybody, the way to do that is to go to shiftgroupconsulting.com. He's got all the information there, and we'll continue to talk about that. And Alex, when we come back from this break, I really have to ask you, I'm curious, because Kevin's usually the one to ask this question, but have you ever worked with somebody that realized where they were is not where they were meant to be and went down a different path, and that actually helped the company itself? So stay with us, everybody.
And we'll be right back. Here is another point to ponder by Positive Talk Radio. The world is full of people who would die for someone they love. But what about living for them? Waking up early to take care of your health. Letting go of the habits that steal your years. Choosing rest instead of running yourself empty. The truth is, your family doesn't want a hero who dies for them. They want a parent who stays. A friend who grows old with them. A soul who chooses life every single day. Don't just die for love, live for it. You're listening to Positive Talk Radio Network. We're on a mission to entertain, enlighten, empower, and educate through inspiring music, dynamic conversations, and yes, laughter. Join me, Kevin McDonald, and Rochelle as we declare our freedom from hate, division, and fear, and celebrate a better way of living. Go to positivetalkradio.net to find out more. And welcome back to Positive Talk. Rochelle, you had a question that I think is really good. So you get to ask Alex that.
Alex, I've got to know, have you ever worked with somebody and they realized their purpose and their passion was not where they were and went down a different route?
Absolutely. And, as a leader, I've managed folks for 30 years, and every so often you end up managing somebody who's not a good fit for the role. Yeah. Or the company. And thankfully, I've had to fire a few, but most of the times it's not firing. It's a matter of talking about the fit, right? And what they really want. And you got to give the feedback if performance isn't, as expected. It's always, I think the best circumstance is that they see that too, and they find another opportunity. And I've stayed in touch with a number of those folks and who have really blossomed in the new role.
So you've actually had, and I have had too, you've actually had people who, for whatever reason, either you encouraged them to resign or take a new job or to do something else, and they came back to you and said, boy, I hated that job. I really wanted to get rid of it, but I couldn't get rid of it. And And so now thank you for pushing me off the ledge so that I can now, the job I have now, I absolutely love. And that's happened to you, right?
Yes, it has. Absolutely. And it's great for everyone. It's good for the company because you end up with somebody who, hopefully you hire someone who is a better fit. And you're not struggling to get them to do the work that needs to be done or to fit in with the culture the way your organization is. But frankly, it's better for them too, because I think of it this way. They were probably wearing a shoe that didn't fit all those years. And you know what it feels like when you take off a shoe that's too tight, like, you feel great. And that's, I think the experience that folks have when they leave an organization or a job where it wasn't the right fit for them anyway. But it's hard to change. It's hard to move. Sometimes they need some encouragement to do that. Usually they land in a very much better place. And I still have those relationships with those folks who I've encouraged out of an organization. When done respectfully and really looking for what's right for everyone, it's worked out really, really well for everyone.
Well, and I love, Kevin, you have to agree with this, because what he just said, he didn't say fire him and find somebody else. He said, figure out the fit. What do they want to do? And to say, hey, we value you as who you are, but the role you're in is not being achieved and we can tell you're unhappy. And then to keep them a part of the cooperation and move them somewhere else where they can blossom into their skills and still feel like they mattered in the first place, rather than just being like, okay, yeah, we're letting you go and we're moving along. Doesn't that also save the company so much money?
Well, it does, because transition is difficult. It's expensive, right? With gaps in service and training and what have you. One of these folks that I'm talking about actually moved into a different role inside the organization and did very, very well. And, we're all behaving inside the context of wherever we are, your boss, your family, whatever your context is. And when our context changes, all of our cues change and we behave differently too. We're not a different person, but we can become very much different in the way we interact with the world around us when the world around us is different. And so, your boss changes and, you don't like your job anymore. Your boss changes again. Now you do like your job. Right? So, I'm great at my job and now I'm not so good at my job because my boss is driving me nuts. Those are just context changes and I'm yet the same person. And I think that's, it's finding the right context for folks to be in. And much of what we're talking about is creating better context. But let's create the conditions so that people feel safe to provide feedback, so that feedback is creating better decisions within the organization, and that we're creating now processes that are not just the sort of, top-down directive cascaded goals. They're that, but they're also, aligning with values, addressing our issues of belief and identity, so that we can, bring our whole person to work and get the change done that we want to get done.
Beautiful.
I had the opportunity I was in a Costco one time, and it was where my son worked, and I saw him. He was working in the produce department, but he was taking stuff to the dumpster. He looked like he was part of the Baton Death March, because he was so unhappy. He radiated unhappiness, and eventually they looked at him and said, "You're radiating unhappiness. We think that you maybe find something else to do because you don't like doing this." And he said, "No, I absolutely hated it." But we have got to figure out a better way.
Well, and my perspective and experience is that most people want to do good work. They want to contribute. They're willing to work hard. Again, it's a matter of finding what they're good at, what they like doing, what are the environment that they're in that is encouraging the great work. Are they even connected to why this is important? I'll pull again from my healthcare experience. Folks who clean hospital rooms are house cleaners. And they really work with some very dirty, messy situations, right? Human waste and what have you. But you know what they are? They're the front line of lowering infections inside of hospitals. They are the first defense of keeping certain conditions, the contagious conditions, to be spread around the hospital. That's a completely different way to frame their work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that the executives would give them as a validation of who they are, that you are preventing disease from infecting and then they become very important.
Yeah. And we actually had, in a different setting, we had a team of those folks actually that showed the before and after with black light, because there are certain things that you can pick up with a black light, which became.
By the way, never take a black light into a hotel room. That's just
I've heard that, but
a good idea.
But anyways, they were able to show the difference in good quality work that became then like a badge of honor and celebration within the organization. So we really lifted up that team for the purpose of what they were really doing, which is creating a safe place for patients who are perhaps immunocompromised.
That is very true.
You should have seen the look on Rochelle's face when I said black light in a hotel room was probably not a good idea. Alex, I have to ask you. So I'm listening to this show now or in the future, and I'm an executive and with a company, and I'm not real happy with the morale, with our service levels, with whatever it is. And I want to call you. What is the process that you are going to go through with them to take their company from where it is to where it could be?
Well, I think, they can go to my website and schedule a moment with me. I've got scheduling available there. The first thing is to understand the situation, for me, to understand their situation a little more deeply, and understand what they're also prepared to do. Because one of the fundamentals, I think, in creating this kind of change is understanding first whether or not the executives are willing to change their behavior too. And I'm not actually interested in working with clients where that is not a condition that exists, right? Because generally the leaders have to change their behavior first, right? So what is it about their morale they don't like, but also what are they doing within their organization, within their leadership, within all of their kind of management rituals that is creating that environment? Because they are contributing in some way. And what are they willing to do? And do they understand at least the need for them to change behavior too? Because sometimes I find that executives think that the change they want to have in the organization is those people over there.
Yep.
We need more accountability from that department. And that may be true, right? That a department or some class of managers versus directors might need to be different. But in order to create that change, there's probably a stimulus that has to come from leadership. They might have to be modeling new behavior too. And that's part of my work with teams, where it's not just, strategically, what is the direction we should take? How do we change? What is the goals that we want to have? That's part of the strategy work. But it's also understanding, what are those kind of hard and soft incentives? What kinds of behavior are we encouraging and not encouraging? What are we modeling to create the conditions for the success of whatever it is we're trying to achieve? So understanding those conditions, and I have a process facilitation that goes through to help identify and sort of bring to light the conditions that would need to be true for us to do what we say we want to do. It's kind of a non-confrontational way to say, what are we not good at and what are we good at? By saying, let's just identify the right conditions. And sometimes, frequently, that's going to be, I help bring this conversation to the fores. How do we need to be different? How do we, the executives, need to be different in order to seed this change? So it starts there.
But do you ever have, I'm sure you have, an executive who is a little egocentric about all of this and is like, oh no, you kidding me? My company, I don't know, it must be the people. I don't get it. They're not listening to me or whatever it is. And you try and help them understand that the culture is not conducive to success, and they're having a tough time believing it.
Yes. And I think it's actually a pretty common problem, because so I think especially folks who come through business school, management school, they're taught, about goals and accountability measures and dashboards and, sort of all these processes of command and control. But they're not working for them because they're not addressing this other side of the work. And it's very difficult especially as you've come up through your career, you've had some success, you have your MBA, you've spent your 15, 20 years, and yet now you're being told that maybe there's some other things you should add to your, other tools you should add to your toolbox. Yeah, it takes a little bit for someone to hear that sometimes. And sometimes they're not ready, and that's okay too. They may not, I probably won't end up working with them. And that's okay too. Right? So, because I do think there is a mindset shift here that is necessary, right? And not everybody's ready to jump on that train at the same time.
When these people are going through business school, do they get any of this information? Do the professors know how to get this information to them so that they can understand that it's not about just numbers and graphs and stuff?
I think it would depend on the business school and the curriculum. I don't think that's where management training has been historically, but I actually think there's a lot more sensitivity to it now. Everything from, more scenario planning, which is a very kind of probabilistic way of looking at the universe, as opposed to, deterministic, which says I do 5 things and I get the 6th result. So there's a lot more. I think that the chaos and the complexity that we're dealing with and have been dealing with probably for 15 years, and it's certainly, I think, becoming more rapid now with some of the AI technology and geopolitical upheaval. There is an openness, and I think it's already permeating the business literature, certainly, and the academy as well.
And this is just a personal observation from my experience. Have you ever worked with an executive who has bald-faced lied to everybody because of, as an example, we had a new general manager of the food service company that came, and he said, this company now will operate as sales and sales support. until we ask for the support, and then he wouldn't give us the support for the sales, so he lied, and then everybody knew it.
Yeah. Well, I have seen a little bit of that. It's not usually quite as bold-faced. It's usually a little bit more cleverly played. But yes, I think it's actually why teams don't stay on board, is because executives, even well-intentioned, make a claim that we're going to do something differently, but they haven't actually put the building blocks in place. They haven't actually built a system or a machine to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver. They don't know that they have it. They just have it. And then, nothing has changed. They're not changing. Systems haven't changed. And then, this is the problem with this strategy execution gap, is that everyone gets fatigued from the shiny penny management trend, the things, the conditions are not actually different. So you roll out your next initiative, and there's a lot of disbelief.
Rochelle,
that's annoying. And I know we need to take our last break. Everybody, please do go to Alex's website. I've got a question that I'm gripping onto from when we come back. But visit shiftgroupconsulting.com. And before we leave, I want to talk about your little section that says perspectives. Mm-hmm. And also something you mentioned in the beginning was your goals aren't big enough. So we might not have enough time to cover this, which means we have to have you come back. But we'll take our last break, and then I have something I've never thought of that I'd love to ask you.
Oh, I can't wait for this. So we're not going to take the break. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm thinking there was one time where I applied for this job, and the job was only about the employees, the people who were there, right? I remember loving this job, but then I started to hate it. We got pizza all the time. They would always do these raffles. Like, there was all these things. I'm guessing at one point somebody came in and said, hey, you're spending so much money focused on keeping the people in the office happy that your customers and your money isn't going where it needs to. And we actually were doing worse than before I had come into this company. So I have to ask you, have you ever stepped foot in a place like that where it was just, there wasn't enough boundaries and restrictions and guidelines set to where it was kind of just a free for all to keep everybody happy and doing their jobs, and it was negative benefit to the company as a whole?
I have not been in that environment. Again, I've spent almost 20 years in hospitals and healthcare, which are, highly regulated industries.
Gotcha.
I've seen that in some startups, where, actually let me revise that. Yes, I have seen that a little bit where there were so few systems that, we delivered. I actually worked there for a while. We delivered service to clients, but let's say all three of us were delivering services to different clients. We were all delivering services differently. And we had different processes, and we had different methods, and we had different, quality of our work product, even though we worked in the same company. So was the company delivering that value, or were each of us individually delivering that value? Well, I would say that the company wasn't delivering the value, because the company actually was providing no infrastructure that meant that this was a company standard, right? So I've seen that experience where there's so few processes in place that what you get is dependent upon who you get. What you get as a customer is dependent upon the day. And, that's not a sustainable model.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a good sales rep, and then you move to a different territory, and then you get replaced by a not so good sales rep because there are no standards. That's the perfect time for that customer to start looking elsewhere.
Sure.
And that's also not good.
No.
And Alex, by the way, I know that you would love to work with everybody, but if you can't push a rock uphill,
if it's a baby one, you can.
Huh?
If it's baby ones, you can take like 100 of them.
Well, you can take a baby one, but if it's a big boulder and you're trying to push it up the hill, it's like you can't make the changes unless go ahead.
But if you picked a bunch of small pebbles and you put them in a bag, you could roll that bag up, and then you've got a bunch of tiny pebbles to build boulders once they get to the top.
Rochelle, you've actually just raised the issue that I kind of was saying earlier, is like focus on the behaviors and the big change happens. Right? Don't try to make your team more empathetic or whatever. You don't have to tell people that that's the ultimate goal. So Kevin, you can work with some leaders, who, if you were to try to tell them that, you're going to become a more sensitive person at the end of this process, or that we're going to do ethnography, and you're going to have greater empathy for your clients or your customers, they might throw me out the door. But if we do the work and show the value, or we have them rounding on teams, or we're scripting their meetings differently, those things will still happen. So it is a little bit like taking lots of little rocks and rolling them up the hill one at a time, and then making them one big rock at the top of the hill.
Yeah, there you go.
That's pretty brilliant there, Rochelle. Very nicely done.
Methods. It's all about imagination, right? I think do you ever work with somebody, Alex, and you tell them, what happened to your imagination? Because they're just so in a box.
Well, that is part of the process I deal with, with some frequency. Again, that's sort of the blinders of expertise, which, keep people from seeing other alternatives and different information. So that is what facilitation and good kind of structured conversation creates.
And doesn't that tie into where you were mentioning goals? You said at the beginning of the show, sometimes our goals aren't big enough. Is that correct?
Well, I think what I said is the goals aren't enough. So just take this analogy as an example. Recently, NFL Super Bowl, you go into postseason, all those teams had the same goal. Mm-hmm. All those teams in the postseason had the same goal, but only one of them is the winner. It's not the goal that differentiated their performance. It was all their processes of training, their morale, all these other things. It wasn't the goal that made them the Super Bowl champions, because they all had the same goal. And in business, you might have goals of growth while your competitors have the same goals. So if you're going to try to, grow your business, and that means taking market share from someplace else, so they have the same goals. So the goal is not what's going to make you successful. So you've got to dig below the goal to say, well, now what are the conditions that it's going to make us successful? Back to that, thing I was talking about earlier, the conditions of success. But then behavior change, again, Is it my goal to lose weight that's going to make me lose weight, or is it all my behavior change that I do? It's all those steps that I take that are going to reach the goal. And I'm more aligned to the goal if it is because I value being a fit person, right? Yeah. So there's that value component. And those are all that soft stuff that, command control management systems, never seem to want to address.
Well, and by the way, Alex, you're going to have to come back because you said the magic word. The Seattle Seahawks are Super Bowl champions.
Dun, 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 dun. I told you to be one of us.
I didn't grow up in Washington, but I was born just south of Seattle.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, really? Where?
I have Washington roots.
Which part of the state?
I was born in Bremerton.
Perfect. That's on the other side of the water. And there are great big Navy ships there.
Yeah.
Mm.
My grandparents worked in the Navy Yard.
Hey, what do you know about that?
Surprisingly enough, in Bremerton, that's like the only jobs available. but now you're all the way. By the way, I got to ask you, if you started here, how did you end up in Maine?
Well, so I grew up in actually Cupertino, California, which is where my parents settled after my dad left the Army. And Cupertino, home of Apple Computers. So I was an Apple Computers hometown guy. But I moved to the East Coast because my wife was from Wilmington, Delaware. And so I followed her before we were married. And then on this opportunity came to me to work up here I'd want to live this far north, but we absolutely love the Northeast.
Well, and you obviously absolutely love your wife because you traveled all the way across the country.
I did.
No. And
Congratulations.
It worked out phenomenally.
Oh, good.
That is awesome. By the way, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation today, and I want to thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share and to talk about it. I think it's exciting work, and I think it's a great mind shift that, the more leaders we can bring into this, I think it'll create greater value to customers and to organizations and also to the people inside of them.
It's true.
And I'd like to share this real quick because a lot of guys don't get this, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it to you or not, but one of the line items on a P&L I've never seen, and nobody has ever, as far as I know, and you can help me here. Have you ever seen a P&L where they assign a number for turnover?
No. I don't know that you can account for it quite like that.
You can't you can do it in a kind of an abstract way.
Yeah.
But
cost of turnover.
Yes, but the cost of turnover becomes expensive, and you're not always going to be guaranteed that the next guy that you got coming in is going to be any better than the last guy if you don't change your systems. Yeah. And to make it better for them, and whenever you do have turnover, you would be better served by finding out why these people are leaving, because lowering turnover saves money, raises productivity, and also improves customer service.
And if they left out of frustration or they weren't meeting their goals because of a broken system, and they bring another person in who's really top notch, but they're inside of a broken system, they're going to have the same struggles.
Yep.
Oh, I have to tell you a quick story about that very thing. I was part of a Alliant Food Service in Seattle, a smaller house. They didn't have the number of line items that like the Cisco did down the street. So what did they do? They went and stole the top producing sales guy at that particular Cisco, who was used to having 15,000 items at his disposal, and now he's coming to work for us who had 6. He lasted less than a year because it was so frustrating for him, because he couldn't bring his customers over because we didn't have the same line items and stuff. So that was a waste of time and money on our part.
Totally understand why. There's oftentimes a disconnect, right? That disconnect that happens in our decision making.
So what you need to do is make shift happen and hire the shift group consulting if he'll have you, which, by the way, that's a great position to be in. It's like, you don't seem to get it.
And that's why, Rochelle, the perspectives are there on my website. It's just an opportunity for me to talk in writing so that people can get a sense of my approach and my perspective and my experience of what works and what doesn't work. So by the time someone, might want to book a discovery call with me, they've already kind of decided that there's something there. Right? There's something here that I'm interested enough to talk to this guy about. So
I don't know why anybody would want to, lower turnover, raise productivity and profits. I can't imagine how that could
actually achieve their strategic goals.
Happy at work? What the hell does that mean?
That's such an overblown thing, as being happy at work. I think. And by the way, I've spent nights in a lot of hospitals. I have never once had somebody say to me, "Hey, how was dinner?" Because I'm scared that they'll get the answer that they already know that the food. Anyhow, Alex, thank you so much. And Rochelle, you get to take us out.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for making this possible today. Alex, thank you for coming to spend this time, share your knowledge, and give people an opportunity to make these changes if they're willing to do so. So I'd love to give you the last minute to share ways to get in contact with you if there's more than just your website and what people can expect, and maybe just a message to leave us with so people can think about some stuff.
Sure. Well, absolutely. You can reach me on my website at shiftgroupconsulting.com. There is an email address for me there, as well as a couple places where you can schedule some time on my calendar if you want to talk for 20 minutes or so, and understand kind of what value I could bring to you. And I think that the opportunity to lead differently, especially in this time where we're dealing with more complexity and more uncertainty, this is the perfect moment to open ourselves up to the diverse experiences of the people inside of our organizations and our customers, and take the blinders off and engage differently so that we can get the movement that we all are looking for and are wanting in our organizations. But some of our mechanical kinds of levers that we've been pulling are just not enough.
And Alex, next time you're here, we've run out of time for today, but next time you're here, I want to talk to you about your opinions about what AI is going to do to the marketplace.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. unless you have a job that's going to be taken by AI, that's not nearly as much fun.
It will be influenced by it for sure.
Yeah, but there's always another route. It's not the end of the road. And Alex can be there to teach you exactly that.
Thank you again, young man. And Rochelle, his website again is?
Yes, visit his website and at shiftgroupconsulting.com, where he's got all of his information, and reach out. You have nothing to lose. And I hate to break it to you, but it might be what you exactly can afford.
And just as a reminder, everybody, you get to make the choice. Is it going to be good shift or bad shift? You get to choose. Make it a good shift. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where stories inspire and voices remind us of what truly matters. May today's conversation give you hope, courage, and a reason to keep moving forward. And just remember, till next time, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got.